Ahoy! I surveyed the entire deep desert so you don't have to. And not only did I survey it, but I also made sure to scan most of the areas so that we actually have resource locations as well, as you can for example see here. I didn't get quite all of them, but the vast majority of them I found, hopefully at least most of the big spice fields and various other resources as well as capture points. So we are going to have a look at it. We're going to start in A and we're going to move through all of them. This was not an easy task to do, thanks to a bug. At one point I lost my Thopter, then got eaten by the sandworm, and then got chased by another guy with rockets. So yeah, it was quite an adventurous day, it took quite a while, but here we are. If you appreciate the work that I'm doing here, please consider subscribing, click the bell. We're going to skip the first floors here, the first tiles, because those are always the same. They don't change from week to week, but everything beyond that will. We got to make sure we're zoomed in enough. We're going to start here in B1 so that we can actually see resources. But as we can see, B1 very empty, and the same applies for C1. However, if we go a little bit further up, we get a little island here in D1. You can see we have some resources here. We have a cave here. Caves are important if you build a deep desert base and you need water in that base for any reason, so you can get some corpses there, but nothing really of value on these islands otherwise, and maybe fuel cells in case you end up needing those and don't want to bring them out. Other than that, in row 1 it continues very barren. There's a few places where there can be random shipwrecks. Obviously I don't know all of those since, well, they may or may not be there when I go by. Here F1 we still have the same situation, and if we go to G1 it's the same thing as well, so we're skipping over those. But then when we get to H1 things change. H1 to the left is still very empty, but up here we have a very significant amount of Stravidium. Note that not all of the Stravidium ores that are here will show up on the map. It for some reason only shows a few every single time. So there is quite a lot of Stravidium in H1 specifically. Nice area to set up camp technically. You also have some titanium here, and you have a cave so you could easily get water to. So this would make a very nice farm spot. But it is also going to be very contested. You'll see why just a little bit later when we look at the neighboring tiles. But this is a pretty nice start and very resource dense overall. Then if we go further up to I1, we're not finding anything here. That brings us to row number 2. We're skipping A once again, nothing here. We're getting out in the deep desert. Still not really anything in the first tile, but then once we get to the end of it, right here on sector C2, you can see some resources and generally some islands, and we have one of the control points here. I'm not going to try and name every single one. You can see the logo, you can figure it out. But yeah, that's the first control point that we have on the map here. And if we go a bit further, we get some more resources, but still nothing of all too much value. If we go to D2, however, we have some interesting resources, because this island, even though it's very, very close to the PvE zone, has some titanium ore, Stravidium mass, some more Stravidium mass here, some more titanium ore here, more Stravidium here. So not a massive amount, and these are actually pretty much all of the ones that are on there, so it's not like there's a lot of hidden ones here. It's just that this is very easy to get compared to everything that's deeper in the desert. So basically this is probably what the PvE zone is going to be like in the future. And I think this week in particular they have added a lot of smaller amounts of nodes on various of the islands, I would call them, rock formations, because you kind of have more of an option to grab a few here and there. You can see the same thing here, just a single titanium ore. I didn't put those on the map that I made because again, it's just a couple and not a dense area of them. Not really worth specifically going to farm, but it's a nice spot to quickly grab some, and we can see the shipwreck here as well. So if you want to just very safely fly in and out with almost no chance of dying to PvP, then these spots are very nice, and there's going to be another one on the other side as well. Then we go up to E2. In E2 we don't really have much, we only have a control point here. Continuing further up, it gets very interesting though. We're now getting towards F2. Again, just a couple small resources here, a bit of titanium, and then we have a similar situation here with a little bit of Stravidium. Not that crazy. And I forgot to point out there's also a cave here, so that is helpful. but then the real big things start in G2. This area that we're getting into is the most resource dense on this week's map. Significantly more resources when it comes to titanium and Stravidium than anywhere else on the map. You can see here tons and tons and tons of Stravidium everywhere, and again much more than you can see on this map, as well as a cave on top of that. So if you have a guild, this might be a good place to set up, as you will have to defend that probably if you set up a base here. And that's also because if you go just a little bit further north into H2, you're finding a very similar situation. Again, titanium, Stravidium, for like another forgotten cave, and various resources scattered around here. And this is really the peak area, I would say. It doesn't really show up the way it should, but there are, I think I counted on one of them, around 19, 18 nodes of Stravidium on these small rock formations. They are not very big. It's literally just a 2 to 3 bases long formation, but it's just completely cluttered with Stravidium. And then the ones further north here are the same, but with titanium. So I think this will be an extreme hotspot for anyone who can control areas, because there is so much stuff here that it's just very, very easy to get as well. And this continues into I2, where we're also seeing another control point, as well as the same thing with titanium once again. So super, super good hotspot, but also dangerous hotspot. And in here we also have a spice field, a large spice field, so that's going to make it even more contested. The same thing continues in Sector 3. Now in B3 there's not really much going on, and while there's a lot of islands in C3, there's also not really much going on here yet. But then once we get to D3, things get a little bit more spicy, because in D3 we can find our first testing station, as well as 2 control points, one here and one here, and a little bit of Stravidium once again, one of those smaller nodes. So I think we'll see quite a few people going there for this very accessible testing station. And then just north of that in E3 once again, a couple of small higher tier resource nodes, as well as a cave up here. So if you want to set up in a rather safe area where you can get corpses, this is a pretty solid spot. That brings us to F3. This area has a dynamic shipwreck. I don't know if dynamic shipwrecks are actually confined to specific areas or can technically be anywhere, but at least that is where I saw one of them. I think they have specific tiles. In G3 we have more of the big Stravidium and titanium situation going on. So particularly for Stravidium I think this is useful, but you kind of branch over into the one to the left here into G2, which has even more. You've got the control point, you've got the buried testing station here, so another testing station. Very easy double testing station run, and you'll see that the other two are also very close soon. So that's very nice. And there is also another cave not too far. You got that one to the left, and then there's another one up here in H3 in combination with a lot of Stravidium. And I say a lot because it is a lot. You can see there's nodes pretty much everywhere around here. Very, very concentrated area. So all in all, you can see that this entire area is a super big hotspot. You can see here in I3 there's not much going on, but everything around here that has like these crazy amounts of resources so close together, very concentrated. Then you've got a cave here, you've got so many labs that are in this area that I think this will be the hotspot for most PvP situations this week. In comparison, Sector 4 really calms down. Once we move up here, we can see that in the first sector of 4 there is pretty much nothing going on, just some lower tier resources. In the second sector of 4, similar situation, there is a shipwreck as well as a control point here though, so that could be interesting for some. Moving further up from C4, into D4 we once again have an empty area. I'm assuming that some of these will get some spice blows and some shipwrecks, but there's really not too much here. Again, a little bit of Stravidium here for example, but nothing crazy, bit of titanium. And we see a similar situation going further up here into E4, just some rare resources, but this should be some very easy farming where not many people will contest you for the most part if they know the map, since there isn't really much happening. Going further into F4, we have at least a cave somewhere around here. So there's some resources here as well as a cave. This could be a nice safe spot to sever as well. Again, I don't think all too many people will go here, but there is still a reason to go into 4 if you want to contest things as well. And that reason is just a bit further up. You can see we have quite a few resources here, and then we have another testing station here. So again, just one tile next to the testing station that we looked at just before. That's over here. Very easy to do in a single run, as well as a control point here. Then going a bit further up north, we also have another control point here. Note, by the way, that this is Aluminum Island this week. I don't know why these islands exist, but yeah, not very great. But then a bit of Stravidium here, just a tiny bit. And further up north, there is once again nothing as far as I was able to find. Sector 5 is a weird one because resource-wise it's pretty terrible, but there are still some reasons for guilds to go there at least. So this might be more dangerous than one would assume. We don't really have anything in B5, but there are dynamic shipwrecks here. Then there is C5, which is also very much blank. And in D5, we can find just a little bit towards the top. So you have to fly quite a while to see anything. And there is a cave here. And again, a small amount of higher tier resources. In E5 is where we have 3 control points. We see a control point here, another control point here, some of the high tier resources, and the third control point is over here. So there's going to be some PvP probably between guilds here. Then in F5 there is a large spice field, the ringworm one. You can't see that on the map, but it is in there, I promise. And G5 is pretty much empty. There's not really anything happening here. So as you can see, that 5 row really is just fairly empty one this week. In the H5 we have 2 control points and a fair bit of Stravidium and Titanium. This particular spot here I think is a nice one to set up a base. It doesn't have an overwhelming amount of resources, but it's probably going to be a lot safer than some of the stuff that is further west in comparison. So I could see this potentially being a point of interest to some degree at least, and people will find it through the control point, I guess, but I still think it's comparatively safe because it's a bit away from the hot zone, but then also still close enough that some people might fly over. In I5, we once again have nothing as far as I was able to find. Sector 6 is somewhat similar. Most of it in the beginning here is relatively empty. There is, however, a single control point here, so keep that in mind as the closest control point to the bases pretty much. Then going up here into C6, we have a small amount of resources as usual, of higher tier resources that is. So also fairly close to the base if you want to grab that. Then going into D6, there are 2 things here. We have a shipwreck here as well as a control point. A few resources here, but not really enough to, I think, really worry about too much. Then in E6 we get some more resources, but also mostly low tier stuff and a lot of sand here still. And then in F6 things start picking up a bit. We have a testing station, the last one that I found, as well as a control point. And you can kind of do a loop between all of those testing stations fairly easily. And also it's nice that we have 4 testing stations this week, so we have a fair bit going on. Other than that, this is relatively empty. Going into G6, that is also very, very empty, with a little bit at the top here. And again, there are some resources here. This is a spot where you could consider a base going close to H6. It's not massive, but it also has a cave over here. So just some nice benefits here and there that are a bit away from the main trouble that is northwest. And if we go to the upper part of it, again, we see some Stravidium here, some Titanium here, Stravidium here, just like scattered across this area. It's hard for me to tell how concentrated these resources might be at other times. Maybe when I flew over they were just all farmed, but they didn't seem super dense, not dense enough for me to specifically put them on the map. And then going into I6, once then have a blank slate. Things get a bit messy once we get to Sector 7, and you will see why in just a second, but it's worth it at the end because the resources up there can be pretty good. Now B7 is pretty much empty, and then going into C7 we see a couple of low tier resources and some high tier resources already, so just a nice spot to grab something quickly, also with a cave. Continuing further up, getting towards D7, and some quicksand, which is always lovely. We once again have pretty much a very blank area with some basic resources. Can be a very quick haul if you just want to go this far up and then go back, but you're not getting all too much out of it. And this is where things get glitchy, as you can see here. This is D7 and now it says F8. This should be E7. So I don't know what's going on with the numbering system here, but something is off. It doesn't matter. It is pretty much blank anyway, except for some small resources on this island. And then going into F7, which is once again actually correct, we have the same situation where we blank, expecting there could be some spice blowers and some shipwrecks around this area in general because there's so much blank. G7, once again, very much blank as well. And then we get to H7, and this is where things get interesting, because there is an island here that I marked on the map that I made as one where titanium and stravidium are similar to the ones to the west. This has less resources in comparison, but it still has a good enough amount of resources for a solo player to farm and just get out with a full scout, I would say, roughly. So this is a nice enough island in my opinion, and this is for everything in the east, everything on 7, on 8, on 9. It's always less resources than what we have on 1, 2, and 3 in comparison, but I think it's a lot safer. And then if we go up further north here, we can also see this cave, and around this cave there are once again more of these resources. There's actually quite a few more here. When I first scanned this, they were kind of missing because I think someone just farmed them at the time, but then I went there again and it was pretty good. Other than that, nothing up here. But yeah, another spot with a reasonable amount of resources. Sector 8 has a lot going on, but primarily for guilds. Also, by the way, if you're looking for it, the taxi service is here. Now, we have the area here in B8, where you got pretty much nothing, going into C8, where we got quite a few resources. And we also have a control point here, as well as, if we go a bit further up, a cave as well, and some resources of various kinds. Going up further north into D8, we get pretty much an almost blank area with a little bit of titanium here, so a tiny bit of stravidium as well. Not very much, but again, very close as well. So it's kind of like on the other side around D2, where you can get a fair amount of resources between D7, D8, even F8, just like small things that you can grab quickly and safely get out without having to worry too much if you just need a couple. So for the PvE players, these are the ones that I would reckon are still relatively safe to go for anyways. And then going into E8, you can see we have a couple of resources here. We have 2 control points here, and there's another one in this area, which I think is a bit further up. Yeah, it's here. And we have a little bit of titanium here, for example. So resource-wise, this is not really great. It's really more of a point control area, but it's got a lot of those. Then in F8, we once again have pretty much a blank area. And going into G8, the same thing, similar to what we had in F7 and G7, very, very empty. But then in H8, there's a few things. There is a control point here. There's another one over here. And this one has a forgotten cave as well. As you can see, there are a couple of resources here as well. This may have been farmed when I went here. I'm assuming that there would be some more resources around this area, because I didn't really see all too much there. But it's a very big island, so I was looking around for a bit. So if you're looking for a less farmed spot, it's definitely worth checking out. Worst case, you just fly over to H7 or to I7. You'll still get plenty of resources. Then going further north from there, in I8, I couldn't find anything. Sector 9 is the sector that now terrifies me, because that's where the glitch happened. We are going to jump through a lot of it here, because B9 is empty, C9 is empty, D9 is empty, E9 is where I almost died because of a glitch, and then F8 for some reason, which should be F9, also empty. Oh, we have 2 F8s, look at that. And then G9 is the only one that has a little bit more in terms of resources. Again, not compared to what we see in the west, but if you want to go for a relatively safe spot, you can get some resources here, and you have a cave here too. So this is a decent enough farm, I would say. Then in H9 we have once again nothing, and up in I9 there is surprisingly a control point here for some reason an iron ore island, which is really annoying. And there's also a bit further out here another large spice field. So, all in all, quite a few places worth checking out. If you want to go for the big resource hauls, then this area here, H2, H3, I2, all of that, that is your main contested area. Very nice amount of resources overall in large quantities, so definitely worth having a look. If you want to go for a lab farm, then I would say you want to start up here in D3, you fly up from D3 and you go to G3 where you can find the other lab, and then you can go over here to G4 where you find yet another lab at the top, and then if you want to go a little bit further, you can go further down here to F6. You'll find your 4th lab and you just go back from there. And it's a pretty short trip comparatively for a lot of testing stations, and hopefully you'll find at least one that hasn't been looted. For small amounts of resources, the middle areas here are pretty nice, and otherwise I would go further up to the northeast around here, around H7 in particular, and I7, and then just a bit further down to G9, where you can generally find a good enough amount as well. Again, if you found this overview helpful, you would massively help me by subscribing to my channel, and that would also tell me to do more of these in the next weeks. Let me know in the comments if you think this is useful, because this takes a lot of time to do. Might have to get some people to help me with this. And other than that, thank you very much for watching, and thanks to my patrons for supporting this video. Duke Sloth, out.